beautiful morning in the suburbs, man. Morning dose. Always take your dose in the morning. Welcome to the morning dose. Another episode here with my homeboy, James Coulter. That crowd goes wild.
What's up?
My name is Mike Colton. We're both microdose coaches here in Vancouver, British Columbia. We're just getting over the craziest heat wave in the history of British Columbia.
In the history. I've never seen heat that. I've never seen over 40 in Vancouver.
In Vancouver.
And in Burnaby, it was 43.
That's crazy.
Lytton
is on fire right now.
It is on fire. The record was 47.5. I know that I have a couple buddies in the car. Ron, I think he said it was 48 in his car temperature. So
it's insane.
Yeah. But today it's a beautiful day. 21 degrees out here. Woo!
The chill is back. Vancouver's back. They were talking about this heat dome. Did you hear about this? This is what this was. So it was a bunch of cold air and hot air moving across the Pacific and created this, I guess what it is the cold bottom and the hot top meet together and clash and create this heat wave, right? Is what it is, I guess. I'm not a scientist or a doctor or a weatherman. I have no idea. But they say it's coming back again. So next week,
oh, really?
Yes, we have another heat wave coming.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I think this heat wave stuff is the beginning of the rest of our existence. I think that during COVID, and in the last 2 years, let's say, we have created things that I think are going to be here for the rest of our lives. I think things have happened that have inherently changed the way we perceive our world and our world is perceived, right? And how it's is served up to us. And I think things are changing, man. I think the weather is where it is. We're going to have heat waves every year. We're going to have crazy rain and crazy heat. The weather's changed in the past few years.
It's changed in the last 30 years. You can see on documentaries ice caps are melting. It's changing.
Yeah.
Global warming.
But even just
it's real.
It's real. I've always thought it was real. And now it's starting to show that we got some issues, right? And I think the other issue is how we look at and treat people has really changed. You know what's funny? We grew up in the 90s, in the 1900s. You and I. We grew up in the 1900s. And what's crazy about the 90s, and I don't know if any of you guys see this on TV.
There were mullets.
Well, there was mullets, but attitudes were a lot different than they are today, man. Right? This cancel thing, right, is like for real. It's going to be here forever. You now have to watch what you say and do online.
Oh, yeah.
Forever. Because it's never going away, right? Those Wild West days are done, right?
Well, a lot of people, Canada, we don't have freedom of speech like the USA. So
no.
There's certain things you can say and be charged for it.
Yeah, you can. And you know what's crazy is look at what happened with Seth Rogen. Hey, he got it really bad for a minute there. But it kind of went off him. He did the right things. He got away from James Franco and he said, "Oh, I'm not going to do any movies with him and everything." But there was a damning video that showed Seth in the exact area where someone was getting berated or sexually, misconduct or something. He did nothing. And so, it's crazy because this really is where we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about today is how you become more aware once you start microdosing and you do the hero's journey, and how your awareness changes and how your attitude in life changes. And what I mean by change is that me personally, my personal experience is that I have less toleration. Is that a word? Toleration?
Tolerance.
I tolerate less now, and I don't get angry like I used to.
I don't either.
But now what I do is I go, "That's not me," and I walk away, right? And that's what the mushrooms have created, this peace inside of me. Yeah. Because James and I both grew up the same way. We played on the rugby team when we were in grade 11 together, right? We were both the same, hot-headed.
Looking for a fight.
Looking
if
for a fight.
In the room, we're like, right, okay,
James is
just waiting to
unscared, right? No fear, man. Just like, talk later, act now, right? Yeah. And it's funny because it's reversed in me. I'm 100% different. And sure, you could say that's age, but if we didn't address our issues with the heroes or the warrior stuff and with the microdosing, we would be continuing down that path of anger and just like lack of self-respect is really what it was, right? And lack of self-awareness.
And ego. And
ego, which is the big word of the year, right? Is the ego, which is the most important thing that needs to be checked.
Put in check. Yeah. Keep it in check. Keep your ego in check.
How did you find after you did your journey? Like, what did you find changed the most about you, personality-wise and just behavior-wise and stuff?
I think my aggression. I think my aggression came down a fair bit. It just took me a step back. So I wasn't, and I get aggressive if I get frustrated. If someone puts me in a bad position, it's fight or flight for me.
Yeah.
So I'll start yelling and start, posturing. But now I sort of, after microdosing, I've been doing it 2 years, and it lets me see things through a different eye.
Yeah.
I look at things different. So, it's harder to get frustrated for me, because I take a second and I, look around, and microdosing lets me see things different. When I'm walking down the street, usually I'm thinking about, what's going on, or if I'm going to be late for this appointment, or,
You're thinking ahead. So
yeah, I'm stressed. I'm on, and now I walk down the street and I know I'm going to be at the appointment, so I'm not stressing about it. I take time to look at, the leaves, how they change color when the wind hits them.
You're just more aware of your surroundings.
I look at the people around me instead of just, head down.
Yeah,
and
walking and...
I mean, Vancouver is a fast-paced city. This is,
a lot of pressure.
I've lived in many cities where it's not, you go hang out on a Tuesday with your friends. Vancouver, you don't, because you're working.
Yeah, you are working a lot.
You're working to pay that rent. You're working to pay them bills, and there's not too much social time.
It's a very pressure-filled city to live in.
It is.
I have friends who live downtown that don't come to see me. And because they're downtown, and I used to think, oh man, they're assholes not coming to see me, but no, it's because they're on the constant grind downtown, and to take a trip to the suburbs is a lot.
It is a big trip. I mean, my own brother lives an hour and 25 minutes away, and I get out there to see him maybe twice a year.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough. Like, I mean, that's my brother.
Yeah,
I should be seeing him, daily, and I do. He works in Vancouver, so he stops in a couple times a week, but to go out and see my nieces, to see his wife, it's a trek. It's a day. It's a whole day, and in this busy life in Vancouver, it's hard to take a day out of the busy schedule.
It is. It's
because
very tough.
The days you're not working, you got
you got 100 things to do.
And
and that's where this microdosing comes into play. If you are in a stressful, fast-paced, pressure-filled life, you don't take the time to allow your brain to relax because you don't have the time. And it's funny, when people do have the time, what do? Onto their phones. You get lost in social media, go down a YouTube rabbit hole or whatever it is. Which is the worst thing you could possibly do in your off time. It's the worst fucking thing. The disconnect that you're causing.
Yeah. You got to reconnect. You got to reconnect to nature. You got to connect.
Yeah. And like you were talking last episode about the connection that happens in your brain, when you do this stuff. And, the deconnection that happens, disconnection. I'm making up words this episode. The disconnection that happens is going on your phone, right? And disconnecting from really anything organic, because we're organic beings. We're cellular. We're the same as a tree, as a bird, as anything, right? As air, basically. We're the same, dude. We're organic. You need to connect with organic things in order to be solid, to feel whole. That's why going out into the bush is a big deal. And I sometimes do this. Like when I have clients and they're doing their macro, whatever, and after they've done their WIRS journey, I'm like, go outside and hug a tree. What? Oh, what are you talking about? Go outside and hug a tree. Do you have a favorite tree? Oh, I actually do have a favorite tree. Where is it? Right there. Go hug it. And I get them to hug it, and they're like, oh, really stupid. But then after about 30 seconds of hugging that tree, you start to feel the energy
Yep.
from that 1,000-year-old being that is sitting in your front yard. There's an energy that comes from that is connected through the mushroom.
It's true energy. There's
true
I was
energy.
just talking about scrolling on the phone. I was going through the Instagram, checking the my mushroom experience, and I was scrolling. And there were a couple sponsored things, and there was one. It was a speaker, a music speaker, and it had 2 wires, and it was to read what plants are saying.
Oh,
It
wow.
turned plant energy into music.
Mm-hmm.
So they would connect one to a plant leaf and then one connector to the soil, and it would play music. And every different plant that he hooked it up to would play different music. I mean, they hooked it up to some mushrooms, and it was playing, it sounded like Mozart. It was amazing. And I was like, I don't know if this is real. And then they hooked it up to a dead plant, and it didn't play nothing.
Oh, weird.
So plants do have an energy for
Do you ever
sure.
play music for your
mushrooms? No.
You've heard of this? Or?
I have, 100%. Yeah. If you play music, but finding, what if I play some country and these mushrooms, they don't
Hate
like
country.
right? Like how we were when we were younger, right?
Yeah.
And they get all angry, and
Yeah.
so I don't know yet. I haven't played music yet, but yeah, it's
Maybe they're inner city mushrooms.
Tupac.
Yeah. I think on this episode, it'd be cool to kind of talk about a process that people would go through if they come and see us.
Yep.
And here's the thing. People, we can't divulge too much. I personally can't tell you too much about what I do because I do things to surprise the brain. I do things to drop somebody's ego when they walk in the door. Some may look at me and go, holy, and get scared because I'm so intense with what I do. But people walk into this, and most people do this, and it won't be you. People walk into it first with fear. Then, okay, I'm going to be brave, right? First of all, it's like, yeah, I want to do it. Yeah, really positive. Then it's like fear. Then it's like, okay, I got to be brave. And if you think about those 3 types of situations you put yourself in, your brain is in a different state on all 3 of those, right? Excitement, bravery, tough, fear, right? Those are 3 states of your brain.
Yep.
And if you're putting yourself in those 3 states before you do this, then things can go inherently wrong. You can have weird visions. You can have you can have a bad trip. It could not work. You could not get high. It could not work. I've seen it, right? So dropping that ego and putting someone in that state of mind that we need them in happens right away. And
that's what we do as the coaches.
yeah. Well, and this is in the journey, right? When you go to take the journey, I've had this every single time. Fear, bravery, right? And then, excitement, fear, and then bravery. That's how it always goes, right? And so when they come in on the bravery, like some people come in on fear, like, oh my God, I don't know, oh, blah, 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 I don't know what to do. And I have something that allows them to calm down. Like I do something and that the ego drops because that's part of what it is the ego has to drop, right? And by talking to the person beforehand, I get a sense of where their ego is.
And you have to trust the process.
You do.
You have to trust this process.
You do. You have to give in, right? But that's part of what we do to get them ready. So, for example, I'm going to give you a story about somebody that, and this is not a tragic one. This is for quitting smoking, that I helped someone quit smoking. And this lady came to me and said, I've been smoking for 45 years and I want to quit. And I'm like, you're never going to do it. She's like, what? I'm like, yeah, you will not quit smoking until you find out what the root of the reason why you're smoking is. You need to find out why you started smoking. And she's like, oh my God, that was 45 years ago. And we're like, well, let's sit down and talk. So I started talking to her. I'm like, 45 years ago, how old were you? And she's like, well, I was 15 or 15 at the time. And I'm like, okay, so why did you start smoking? And she's like, I don't know. I just started smoking. And I'd say, where did you have your first cigarette? She goes, I had my first cigarette at school with my friends and girlfriends. I'm like, okay. And then, where did you get your first cigarette? She goes, I took it from my dad. And I'm like, okay, so your dad was a smoker. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, how was your relationship with your dad? And she's like, it was good. She had a good relationship with her dad. But her childhood was a little weird. And I'm like, why? I said, well, she grew up in an era where there was no smoking inside the house. Or there was no kids allowed around smoke back in the day. So what would happen, we through a whole bunch of series of questions or whatever, we got to the point where I found out that she was just a little girl watching or TV or listening radio, whatever they were doing. They were in the living room playing. And her father would come into his favorite chair in the living room and sit down and spark a butt. And he would tell her, you got to go outside. I'm smoking. He wouldn't go outside to smoke. He would sit in his favorite chair and tell her to leave.
Yep.
And so she would get up, put down her dolls or toys, whatever, and she'd have to go outside or go to her room. And that would happen every single time her dad had a cigarette, maybe 10 times in a weekend, a few times in a night. She would have to leave her. And so psychologically, what I found is that she associated smoking with abandonment issues.
She wanted to be accepted. She wanted to hang with dad more. So the
right?
only way to do it
was to start smoking. And so she started smoking. And she developed a relationship with her father over time that was, hey, Dad, let's go have a butt. And she'd have a butt. And then her dad died. And she was left with that habit, right? And so we're like, okay, so like I said, I'm not a psychologist. I just guess on a lot of things. And so what we did was we got her on a warrior's journey. She went in with five plus grams psilocybin. And it was crazy because I set her down with some music to start. But then after about an hour of music, took it off her. And I said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to sit here. And I had a bunch of kids' books from my childhood, Dr. Seuss books. And I'm like, we're going to read Dr. Seuss books together. And so I sat down, we sat on a couch. And at this time, her brain's mud. And she's about the equivalent of a 10-year-old girl. And we started reading Dr. Seuss books together. And it's weird, dude, because you got to be open on this. Like as a guy, and as a man doing this, it's very dangerous because there's a lot of emotion that come out of people, right? And as I'm sitting here with her, she's cuddled into me like a child on her bed, me and her alone. And we're reading Dr. Seuss book. This is a weird fetish in some parts of the world, but we're reading these Dr. Seuss books and it's opening her up, man. It's opening her up. She's crying. She's calling me dad. She's like reliving moments that she never had with her father. Because when you're cast away and constantly told to leave away, you start losing self-worth. Yep. Even as a child, you start to think like, I'm not worthy enough to be in his presence. What can I do to be in my daddy's presence? And then that's when the smoking started for her, and it never stopped. And in fact, I found out that she was actually smoking, or she had tried cigarettes when her dad wasn't around at her house. She tried and light one and smoke one. And she didn't know why she did that. And I'm like, that's because you're trying to connect. Yep. Because we want in earth as human beings is to connect. You and me, we connect and we have long-lasting friendship. That's all anybody wants on this planet, dude. That's what we're here for. Acceptance. And so when we went through that, it was crazy. It was weird. If someone walked in, that would have been like a really weird situation, but it's what needed to happen, dude. And she went down to 3 cigarettes a day. She went from 2 packs to 3 cigarettes a day. And then she disappeared. I haven't talked to her since. And it's really weird. This happens all the time. Like I deal with people and then they just find themselves and they go. And you interact with as much as you can, but you realize like you're just here for a moment to help somebody and then you just bounce, right? And then it's like, you can do a bunch of therapy afterwards and I keep track. I usually call or text people, hit them up, right? They answer me, they don't answer me. It doesn't matter anymore, right? The fact that I know that something happened to them is the true reward of what we're doing, right? And, and like I said in previous episodes, When you do these things and you make these monumental steps forward, you take these gigantic leaps in the controlling of your mind and getting control of your life. You have to put action into it.
Yep.
If you don't put action behind the dosing, nothing changes. Nothing changes, man. You know, and for her, this lady, I remember she went to her father's grave, where his father lived. She had to do this, and this was what I told her: go to your father's grave with a fresh pack of cigarettes and leave them on his grave. She's like, why? I said, because it's dying with him, and you have to get that in your brain that your dad is gone, and with him went the cigarettes and the smoking habit. And it's okay. It's not like you're pushing blame on somebody that's deceased that you loved. What you're doing is you're associating your root issue with your issues with the root problem and saying goodbye. And I do this in a lot of other things. Ceremonial things are very important when it comes to doing the warrior's journey. You know, it's like the warriors, ancient Incans back in the day would sacrifice to the gods.
Yep.
That was a way of them moving forward and allowing, you know, if they took a warrior's body and you see it, they put it and they light it on fire for the gods or whatever, right? Giving them to the gods. Goodbye. So the warrior is complete, right? You need to do that with yourself.
This is a great action during therapy. I've done it a few times in my grief and loss counseling where, you know, someone has lost, say, their father or their mother, and they forgot to say some things before they passed, or they started losing, you know, their mind before, and they weren't able to, you know, say things. So I usually get them to write a letter with all the things that they want to say, set up a chair across from them, and read that letter, pretending that person is there, and then after burn it.
That's cool. That's and that, I wasn't going to disclose that part, but yeah, that's a really big part of our therapy sessions is the burning.
But it reminded me with the Dr. Seuss books because we have a pretty cool guest going to be on our show.
Yeah.
And he wrote sort of one of those books.
It's hilarious.
Green Buds and Hash.
Yeah.
I think it was called.
Dana Larson, yeah. So it's funny, Deems and I went down to visit Mr. Larson, and it was weird because I had over microdosed that day by accident. I just took more because I was like, whatever. It's just a day out with James. I'm gonna go walk around. I'll be a little bit more on top of shit, you know.
I want to float around.
I wanted to float, and I definitely floated right into Dana Larson's arms, and I'm like, I felt like such a tool, dude, trying to talk to him. And I'm explaining to him like, hey, sorry, I overdosed, microdosed a little bit today. Right? I felt like such a tool. And he's such a gentleman, dude. He's looking at us like, okay, cool. That's okay, guys. I've seen it all.
And we're trying to be respectful coming
and
into
professional.
His place. And what do you do when you go into someone's store? You want to buy something. So he has a little coffee shop in there. This guy figured out that it's legal to import coca leaves.
Amazing.
The leaves that you make cocaine with. And what he does is he makes coffee with it.
On a micro level.
So me and Mike had a Cocachino.
Cocachino. Listen, if you're in Vancouver, you get a chance, go on down there to the dispensary on Hastings and go get yourself a Coca coffee. Dude, that was one of the best coffees I had in a long time.
Absolutely delicious. I agree with you. And it didn't give me... And I was asking, what kind of feeling does it give? Because caffeine, you know, it gives me a little bit of a jittering. If I have too much, I feel anxious. And he's like, no, it's and it was smooth. It was a smooth feeling.
Yeah, he's got a really great operation going on there. And if you don't know who Dana Larson has been a fixture in the Vancouver healing scene. I'm going to call it healing because what he does is he heals, man. He's a fucking healer.
He's been a great advocate for
marijuana, anything that is helping people cope or to get better or to figure out answers, right? Is that guy, dude. And you know, these young bucks just show up at the Amsterdam Cafe and like, I'm allowed to smoke, and they have no idea about the process that went into getting that spot open.
Work. This guy's an OG.
OG. more OG than us. He's like
Oh, yeah.
super OG, right? As they call him on the street, right? Super OG.
Super OG.
Right, but we are going to set up a podcast interview down at the cafe. We're going to go down there and take the morning dose to Dana and have a good little conversation with him. Maybe ask him some questions he's never been asked before.
Yeah.
Right, and it's kind of getting to his head about what's the future of this and what we're doing, and what his perspective is on people finding themselves using psilocybin.
Yeah, we've watched the marijuana industry just absolutely explode and boom to where, there was one dispensary, and it wasn't even a dispensary. It was, the marijuana headquarters, and you have to go across the street to, a little,
remember that?
A little black door to get your marijuana.
Remember the black door?
Or up to the third floor to get your
the
weed.
sketchy.
Or there'll be a guy standing right by the Camby. He'll hook you up to, like
dispensaries.
You think there's 100 in BC? 100 dispensaries?
Yeah.
There's at least 50.
Yeah. And
so
that
we're
guy,
going from zero to and Dana was the driving force behind the legalization or the decriminalization of marijuana. And where we're at right now is, right at the beginning of where mushrooms. And this is a man who opened up, the first dispensary in Vancouver.
Yeah, yeah.
So we want to talk to him, and we want to see, how'd you do that?
Yeah, he's real fascinating character. So I hope it's going to be a really good episode, and we hope to get him on in the episode number 7 or 8. So that's the next 2 episodes coming up.
Super excited.
Got the proposal out for him. He seems like a good dude. So Mr. Larson, if you're there, we're looking forward to talking to you on the next episode of The Morning Dose. It's good, bro. It's been a good morning.
It has been a good
morning. You're gonna do your dose after this,
yeah.
And you guys can follow him on his dosing journey today if you like, or any other day. My mushroom experience on Instagram. You can find James there. Hit him up, and he will give you any information you need. Right.
For sure.
You can find me at microdosebc.net, or you can go to the alteredstatetherapy.com online if you're interested in any sort of therapeutic stuff. So one thing we are going to do, and I'm going to encourage anybody who is listening or wants to get in, is that we want to give people a chance to experience microdosing in a safe environment for the first time. Some people are very nervous about doing microdose because they think it's going to ruin their day.
And I find a lot of people get scared. And what I've been noticing is sometimes, if I say always, and you've heard me say it before, if you're feeling the microdose, you're doing too much. Yeah. However, many people on their first microdose, even though it isn't too much, they do feel something.
Yeah.
So I would like to,
yeah. So, and usually what people feel is a brightness, like a light goes on, like an LED light around their eye.
A little bit lighter.
Yeah, lighter. So what we are going to do is we're going to set up a one-time seminar. That's just going to be a quick, probably won't be more than an hour, maybe an hour, because we'll talk to people afterwards, right? Probably a couple hours. We're going to set up a location, and we're going to invite anybody who wants to microdose and experience it and know what it's like. We're going to give you one free session. All right. There's going to be a sign up. We're going to set up a sign up, and we're going to get a spot somewhere in Vancouver, Burnaby maybe, and we're going to do it. Right. And we're going to show people what microdosing really is and what it will do for you and how you will feel, because the first time is usually the harshest time. So if it's going to affect you, it's going to affect you on the first one. So it's better to have microdose coaches around to guide you through that. Right. So that's going to happen. So make sure you look for the advertising. We're going to do it in a couple different cities and get out there and start getting people to take charge of their life and their brain. Right.
Amen.
Amen, brother.
Amen, brother.
All right, this is another episode of The Morning Dose. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast that we have going. We really appreciate anybody who's listening. And if you are listening and you like what we're doing, please leave a comment below on any one of these social media stations that you're watching this podcast on. All right, let us know what you think. Let us know if you want any information.
And sign up for the newsletter.
Yeah, and sign up for the newsletter on the website here. We're going to put the address and the link in the comments below. All right. All right, until the next dose, hopefully we're going to be in beautiful downtown Vancouver.
Yep.
All right, doing our first interview with our first guests. It's going to be exciting, man. That's going to happen on the next morning dose. And don't forget, always do your dose in the morning. I'm Mike Olton.
James Colton.
Yes,
Have a great day.